Let's go to the UK quickly, where thousands of farmers have protested over an inheritance tax that's going to be introduced on farms worth £1 million or more. Now, this will be a 20% inheritance tax that will be charged. Farmers are calling it a bankrupt tax because, of course, farms are, asset rich, but you don't make a lot of money in farming. In fact, they reckon they make less than 1% of the value of the property per year in the actual farming. So if you're paying 20% of the value of the property over 10 years, but you're only making 1%, you are going backwards at a fast rate of knots. Jeremy Clarkson, who's well known around the world, he attended the protest and he spoke to protesters. I want to show you him speaking at the rally about how bad this is and saying the government must change their mind. I want to show the grab where he's, yes, this is the one. Let's go.
I beg of the government to be big, to accept that this was rushed through, it wasn't thought out, and it's a mistake. That's the big thing to do, admit it, and back down.
He's exactly right, Caleb. This hasn't been thought through because if they force farmers off the land, these are farmers whose families have been farming for generations. They won't be replaced because do you know anybody who, when you ask them when they're a little kid, they're living in a city, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to go and farm. It's either in your blood or it's not. And Andrew Lloyd Webber makes this point, and we might go to him in a moment, that if farmers are removed from their land, they won't be replaced. Who feeds the country?
Precisely, because it's been exempt. Farms have been exempt because, exactly as you say, farmers are asset rich in that they own the land, but they're cash poor. They don't have cash on hand. So if you're going to charge the kids 20% of the value of the farm for the farm to go into their hands and they don't have the money, well, then they have to sell the farm, right? Andrew Lloyd Webber, as James just mentioned, of course, doyen of musical theatre, went down to the protest and pointed out exactly that.
What is the fear, Andrew? What would your fear be should this tax impact these farms in the longer term?
In the longer term, what will happen is they'll all be bought by probably foreigners, outsiders, people who are not buying it for the love of the countryside. They're buying it purely as a long-term investment. Many, many, many people hovering around at the moment, rubbing their hands in glee about all of this, and I can assure you they're not British.
And if I can go back to Jeremy Clarkson for a second, he was being questioned by a BBC reporter who seemed to be running government lines, essentially, and it went as well as you would expect with Clarkson.
So it's not about you, it's not about your farm and the fact that you bought a farm to avoid inheritance tax?
Classic BBC there, classic.
Is it?
Oh yeah.
Where should they get the money from if it's not from farmers?
From farmers.
Hear that, everyone?
With
BBC
assets.
thinks you should be paying for everything.
And I think this is really important that Clarkson is there. It's a bit like the Donald Trump thing, right? Clarkson has plenty of cash. If he wants to give his farm to his kids, they're going to have the money to pay the inheritance tax. It's of no concern to him, except that he believes in what he is saying. He is a rich man standing up saying you are getting a raw deal from the government, and it is no coincidence that it is farmers that are getting a raw deal from the government because they don't want people, landholders, to actually contribute anything to the world because, could be carbon emissions involved.
I think it's very naive to say that, this just hasn't been thought through. They've rushed through the legislation. Are you kidding me? Where have you been for years? The war on farmers have ravaged Germany, who shut down an airport. They brought hundreds of their tractors to protest in Germany. In France, the farmers all charged in and famously were dumping manure into the Houses of Parliament because they too were being persecuted. In the Netherlands, again, there were thousands of tractors holding entire cities besieged because they too were being persecuted. Ireland, farmers standing in their fields crying, saying the government is taking my land. It is making my living just unlivable. I can't do it anymore. They're either making the fertilizer too expensive, etc., etc. Each and every one of these countries comes up with some bogus excuse to make life unlivable for their farmers. You've got to ask yourself, what the heck is going on? Surely no one is more important to the flourishing of any country. But if you control the food, you control the people like nothing else. And in my having read some about this legislation, I feel like Keir Starmer's gone full Stalin. I mean, it is just absolutely unthinkable. And sadly, in this country, we don't treat our Aussie farmers any better. If you know some, you know that I am telling the gospel truth. It is utterly shameful, and I genuinely think there is something far more nefarious behind it. People snaffling up farmland after making farmers just go, I can't do this anymore. You've literally made it impossible. To me, it seems very nefarious.